We've all been there. One of the children is crying or yelling in our face. We want to handle it. We want them to stop having that negative behavior and communicate more effectively, but we don't know how to have calm and confident parenting in the moment. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how you can have calm and confident parenting no matter what is happening in front of you. I've raised a lot of young people. I've raised 4 children of my own. They're all adults now, having children of their own. I've got 6 grandchildren. And I raised also a number of foster children. I did therapeutic treatment care for a lot of years. And so a lot of those children that I've raised or I'm still associated with are very strong-willed. In fact, you know, as the mother, you always think to yourself, well, you're going to get a strong-willed child because you're very strong-willed. I'm sure my mother thought that about me because I was strong-willed. Anyway, I'm seeing my strong-willed grandchildren now and going, okay, well, I'm really glad that my children understand about calmness, how important it is, and the skills and principles of self-government. So that's some of the stuff that I would like to share with you today. So years ago, the BBC contacted me and asked me if I would be on a program called The World's Strictest Parents. I know that sounds scary, don't be afraid, but I was on that program. In fact, I starred in their most popular episode of The World's Strictest Parents that they ever had. It was their most watched. They, in fact, contacted me multiple years in a row asking me if I knew any other parents like me that they could film an episode with. So what happened in this episode, and by the way, you can see reaction videos to the episode here on the channel. So I'm not going to go into great detail because basically it's all here, and the full video without reactions is on my website, teachingselfgovernment.com, under the blog tab. Anyway, so 2 troubled teens, both ages 17, came to stay in our home for 8 days. And they had tantrums like toddlers. They went out of control, ran away, all kinds of things. And the world saw us stay completely calm, love the children, help the children solve their problems, but be very firm. We were not squishy, soft, walk-on-you parents. In fact, anything but. But by the end of the program, those children were begging not to leave our house. And maybe I shouldn't say children. They were teens. I don't use the word teens that much because the word teenager started out as a derogatory term. So anyway, but they actually were saying, please don't make us go. We feel so safe here. So that tells you something. This out of control person, this power struggling, fighting, strong-willed, teen-aged child actually feels really safe when there's some sort of structure that they can hold on to, boundaries that keep things in alignment. They want order around them, but also inside themselves. We all want order inside ourselves. A word for that order is calmness. Some people might call it the pursuit of happiness, actually, when you find that order, that peace inside, because you're not going to be ruffled by what's going on around you. You do have a plan. You know what to say. You feel wise when you're in the circumstances. That's when you know you truly do have that happiness to carry you through a lifetime. So calmness is a vital piece of that recipe of happiness that people have. And we have to teach it to other people. In fact, we must assert it in our home communication. Otherwise, people won't know what it is. The world around us is wild. I'm sure you've seen that. People are arguing all the time. They're in their little silos and camps, fighting each other over silly little things, instead of knowing how to communicate their opinions and accept that not everybody will think the same way that they do. Can our children learn how to live in this world? Well, yes. If in your very home, you can teach them about calmness, but it starts with you being able to be calm too. So the definition of calmness, according to philosopher William Jordan from the 1800s, which is my favorite definition of calmness, has multiple things in it, but one thing I wanted to focus on here in this video was he said that calmness is absolute confidence, conscious power, ready to be focused in an instant to meet any crisis. Think of that. You are just ready all the time. You're completely poised with confidence, just, in your pocket, pull out any time. So many parents struggle with their communications when their children are not being calm because they don't have the confidence in their own skills, in their own parenting, in order to help their child be able to find the calmness that they need. So really the solution is that as a parent, you need to find the skills to preserve your calmness and help them maintain calmness while still being able to understand each other's communications and problem solve at the same time. You might be asking yourselves, is this even possible? The answer is yes, it totally is possible. In fact, in that BBC program that I talked about, we actually taught it in the first day. In the first couple of hours, those youth were in our home. They were both 17. They learned it this fast. That doesn't mean that they were going to do it immediately, initially. In fact, first they fought. But then after that, they decided, you know what? I think we'll just be calm. In fact, that was what the majority of our conversations were about was, listen, I know you want to tell me something. I want to know what that is, but we need to choose to be calm first. Then we can talk about it. They might say something like, I don't want to do a chore. And I would say, it seems to me that you want to tell me something about doing a chore, and I want to hear your perspective and have the conversation with you, but we need to choose to be calm first, then we can talk about it. You see, I have a cardinal rule. Rule number one for me is you do not talk about it unless you're calm. So what that means is a person actually has to be trained on what is calm and what is not calm. But as you can see, I have this little tiny script. Now that is a tiny script compared to some of the other scripts that I have. So I've taught my children scripts like the 4 basic skills of self-government. So what are the 4 basic skills? They are following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. So for instance, when a person learns to accept a no answer, they know 4 steps, which are to look at the person or the situation, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then drop the subject. If a person does not do any one of those 4 steps to the skill accepting no answers or criticism, then I know I need to use my skill for doing an effective correction, which is a unifying, calm way to help course correct, but teaches them cause and effect too, so that they get the opportunity to earn negative consequences, learn from their mistakes, and fix the behavior problem that they had in the first place. Everything feels unifying, it holds the family together, and there's a lot of pre-teaching ahead of time before we would ever get to this place of actually doing the corrections. They would know exactly how I'm going to do every single correction. Now, what about some of those children who just don't accept a correction no matter what? Maybe they're oppositional defiant. I lived with some of those when I did therapeutic treatment care for those troubled children. And I'll tell you what, they need to know that everything is their choice. But this doesn't mean that you constantly say, well, it's your choice. Would you rather this or this? No, that's not what I'm talking about. They need a framework, they need a structure, and they need to know that someone is going to hold them to that. So they need to know that there are consequences based upon their choices and that they are choosing and that you will follow through. They also need to have a stopping place. So not only are you going to do consistent feedback steps like praising, correcting, and then also preparing them for success with pre-teaching, but if they go completely out of control, you're ready with some intensive teaching measures to help them get back into their front brain and to choose calmness too. Most people choose not to be calm because they go to midbrain and then back brain and they stop being able to think. This is because of what happens with the chemical reactions in the brain. Now, I talk more about those chemical reactions in the brain and what you can know to help you go front brain in this book, The Power of Calm, which you can find on my website, teachingselfgovernment.com. But just to keep it brief, when you're in your front brain, your prefrontal cortex, some people call it the upstairs brain, when you're there, you have 100% ability to think. You should be completely calm. When you are getting just a little bit anxious, emotional, worried, stressed, or afraid, you go to your midbrain, which is that amygdala part of the brain. When you're in midbrain, you have maybe 40% ability to think. If you continue to get stressed, fearful, angry, or frustrated, whatever it is, and you go all the way to back brain, that brainstem part of your brain, that's called the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain. When you get there, you have maybe 10% ability to think. If you're lucky, you've probably had those types of experiences like I have where you've gotten so stressed and worried that you're like, I can't think. How come I can't think? Brain, come on. You're not doing your job. And it's because you're all the way to that primal part of your brainstem, which is making it very, very difficult for the front brain, which had to develop over time to actually be reached and do its work. So there needs to be a plan for how to pull a person from back brain or even midbrain to the front brain so that they can start thinking again. And that's the stuff that intensive teaching is meant for. So as a parent, I'm prepared with a dialogue for intensive teaching. My children are prepared for that, and they know all of the other dialogues, scripts, and skills that we use for teaching self-government. Now, some people think maybe this whole scripting thing sounds a little robotic. Well, I have to tell you something. We're all robots. We've all been programmed, whether by our parents, by the media, by some book we read, or just something we made up ourselves that we thought sounded good and creative in the moment. We're all robots. We've been programmed. When that one thing happens, you say or think the same thing every time. The only way to change our outcomes is to change the processing that we have on the inside. And it is possible to do that if we're deliberate about it, if we're self-governed about it. Self-government is achievable. I'd like to help you more with that. I highly recommend going to my next video that goes into a little bit more detail about calmness and gives you a free gift too. It's called How to Be a Calm Parent. I'll see you there.